Andrew Brandt. Welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Good to be with you, Marcus. Happy to do it.
I'm very excited to talk to you today. I was thinking that we split this half hour or so, that we talk a little bit about your background, then what you do right now, and then end up with some Q&A and some recent events in sports. How does that sound?
Sounds good, and I'm happy to get right to it. I know a lot of people ask me, I'm sure that listen to this podcast, the same thing, which is, how did you get into it? A lot of young people ask, how do I get into it? What are the secrets? I wish there was a formula where I could tell young people, I could tell students, that so many students and even business professionals transitioning to sports, this is the way you do it. Unfortunately, there's not. It's not a formula. I know people don't like hearing right place, right time, but sometimes but I think with anything, you put yourself in position to be successful by what you do. And before we leave today, I'll give you and your listeners some ideas that I have to sort of help them get a job in sports, maybe succeed in sports. And it's more advice about life than sports. But my background, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was a tennis player. I went across country to Stanford University in California. I wasn't good enough to play on their big team, but I played kind of on their JV team in tennis. But mainly I used it as an educational resource for me. And I thought about staying out there, and I really wanted to sort of see if there was a way to marry my interest in sports. And it really didn't happen. So I said, what do I do now? Well, I go to law school. That can't hurt. And had I gotten into Stanford Law School, I probably would have never left the West Coast. But I didn't get in, and I got in back in my home in Washington, D.C. I went to Georgetown Law School. And luckily for me, there was a firm down the street in Washington, D.C. It's no longer, but it was called ProServe, and represented a lot of tennis players. And here I was, a tennis player. And thankfully, those people at the firm had run a lot of local tournaments, and they knew me. So I got to be an unpaid intern while in law school, and then continued. And then I had to make a choice. Like, do I want to go this sports route, which is very exciting, very fun, but not secure and not lucrative, certainly for a young person? Or do I want to go into the more secure world of law? Because being a sports agent is not really being a lawyer. It's very different. So I chose sports. I realized I was giving up some security and money, but I did. And I worked there for 6 years. I worked for a guy named David Falk, who was a super agent in basketball. Of course, Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and Allen Iverson and Alonzo, all these great, wonderful NBA players. And I got to work with them and Michael Jordan, which was a wonderful experience. But I saw a different path, because I saw we had some football players, American football players, who really weren't getting a lot of attention. So I said, I'm going to do football. I never played, but I loved the game. I went to games at Washington Redskins growing up, and I said, I'm going to do this. And really, ProServe was a tennis firm that had some basketball and football players, and I was doing some tennis when I started. But I moved over to football because I said, there's my opportunity. And over those 6 years, grew our little team from 3 clients to 5 to 10 to 15 by the time I left. And why did I leave? Because the NFL was starting something called the World League. It was its first foray into Europe. And I was dealing with a general manager of the Minnesota Vikings who was negotiating for my client there. And he sort of looked at me and said, would you be interested in this? And I said, what? He said, running a team. How about the Barcelona Dragons? I said, what's that? He said, we're going to start a team. It's going to be a new league. It's going to be exciting. And we want young guys like you to run these teams and have fun. And I'm like, a single. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I left the agent business. I've done this twice now for the management side. So I switched from players to team. And this was quite an experience. I could spend hours talking about Barcelona, but being in Europe, the appetite for American football is much different. and especially in Spain. Germany and London obviously have great followings, but Spain was very different. I got there, they were putting up the end zones, the goalposts in the corners of the end zones. We never could get enough food. We never could get good practice facilities. They ruined our uniforms every time they washed them. And then the games, they cheered at the wrong times, and they did the wave the whole game long. I had a fan telling me what we do right, what we do wrong. He would say, Andrew, you have too many meetings. And I'm like, what are meetings? He said, you run a play, then you meet. And then you run a play, and then you meet. I said, yeah, they're called huddles. He said, no, don't do that. So I had to deal with all of these things for 2 years. I was there from March until June every year. And it became more of a psychological thing, because this was pre-internet. And I had 45, 50 American football players that had never been out of the country and were there for 4 months. And they didn't understand the language. They couldn't read. They couldn't watch TV. It was really a tough experience, but it taught me a lot on how to deal with adversity. That league suspended. It came back later as NFL Europe without Barcelona. And I went back to the agent business. My time there was really dominated by, I got a guy named Ricky Williams, who was a great player, University of Texas, and I hung on to him. He won the Heisman Trophy, and my whole career has now changed. But a few months into that, I see people hanging around him, and he says, yeah, I want to switch to this guy, Master P. I'm like, who's Master P? It's like, he's a rapper. I said, okay, what about me? He says, I want you to work for Master P. Well, I was going to do it. And thankfully, the Green Bay Packers called. I had had clients over the years, but I had, it was out of the blue. They tell me that their coach, Mike Holmgren, just went to Seattle. He took the guy that ran the business operations. I said, okay. And they said, well, how'd you like to switch sides? And I said, come to Green Bay? And they said, yeah. So I go up there and I ask, do I have to actually move here? And they said, yeah. And now I had a wife and kid, and I'm like, okay, we'll get off the train of chasing players around the country and do this, even though it's a very unfamiliar geographical area. But we did. And Marcus, I was there 10 years. I mean, I think the basics of what I did there, I managed our player payroll, which anywhere from $100 to $200 million over my time there. And of course, you manage the cap, you do all the player contracts, you deal with all the player issues, whether they have fines or grievances or personal issues. And I was basically doing what I did from the agent side, now on the other side, although I didn't have to do as much hand-holding. And I enjoyed it, but I think, I got to a point in Green Bay where I wanted a little different living experience. I couldn't go out of my house without being asked about the Packers. It just closes in on you there. It's too insular with the Packers. For me, I wanted some more diversity for my kids, and I wanted to do something else. I felt like I had done every contract there was to do in NFL. So I wanted 2 areas, what I've been working on the last 10 years. One is media, and the other is academia. And I thought there's a way maybe I could uncover this world for listeners, readers, viewers, and students. And that's what I've been doing. On the academic side, first we moved to Philadelphia. My wife's from there. And after moving her to rural Wisconsin for 10 years, she got to pick. So then I started at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. I was teaching there sports business, sports law, negotiations. And then Villanova out in the suburbs of Philadelphia called and said they had started a program, a brand new endowed program. And would I run that? And I chose to do that. That's 6 minutes from my home. So I said, all right, we'll do this. And that's a whole program now. So I run it at Villanova. I teach, I organize symposia and events. I organize speakers. I have 13 fellows that work for me there, students. I have directed research. I have internships overseas. So it's a real job, and I enjoy it. And then on the media side, I was in the right place, right time again, because in 2011, when I left the Packers, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey were all experiencing lockouts. No one knew what that was. They needed a lawyer. They needed someone with experience to explain it. I joined ESPN. I talked about that for like a year, and then I talked about every other part of the sports business up until 2017 when they made changes there. And then I started writing for ESPN for myself first, then ESPN, and then Peter King of Sports Illustrated was putting together a site called MMQB, Monday Morning Quarterback. I joined that in 2013. I've been writing columns for Sports Illustrated now almost 10 years, hard to believe. And then, of course, I started my podcast, The Business of Sports, in 2018. And I started my newsletter in 2020. And I actually have a premium site to my newsletter where people pay for daily videos from me, as well as weekly meetings through Zoom. So I got a lot on my plate, Marcus, but I still think I don't know what the word is. I'm happier than my previous two lives, even though I got all these different gigs, because I can organize my life around my schedule rather than players or teams telling me what to do. On the personal side, my boys' two sons are now out of the house, but I travel to see them all the time. I'm currently in Dallas, where my younger son is, and then I'm very into fitness. So I run, I race, I do triathlons, and I make time for that every day. So that's a 13-minute answer on who I am and how I got here.
Yeah, and so interesting. And you have done so many things, as you said, started out as an agent and then worked for the Packers. If we talked about that, because you were there for 10 years, you were the vice president of the Green Bay Packers. So there are a lot of funny stories that I've heard about different trades. For example, with David Bowens was one example. If you can tell that story.
Yeah, I'm not sure many people know who David Bowens is. He was a defensive end of ours. And I'll tell it quickly. My son and I were at a beach, northern Wisconsin. I was on a vacation, but I always did the trades, Marcus. So when there was a trade, our people would say, Andrew, just, you have a relationship with the NFL, call it in. We were trading the Buffalo Bills. I was dealing with my Buffalo Bills colleague, and I was happy to do it, even though I was on a beach in northern Wisconsin. All of a sudden my phone just dies. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm nervous about the trade and letting down the Green Bay Packers. So my son and I trudge up to a ranger hut, if you can imagine, a little hut in the middle of a state park. And I say to the park ranger sitting there, and we're just in our swimming trunks. And I'm like, I'm Andrew Brandt with the Green Bay Packers. We're making a trade with the Buffalo Bills. Can I use your phone? And he looks at me like, who the F is this guy? And I say, please. And then I just realize I got to do something drastic. So I actually come up to his desk, put my hands on his desk right in front of the phone. I said, listen, I've got 20 minutes to make this trade, or the Green Bay Packers are not trading David Bowens for a tight end. And then I looked at him, and I knew I had him then, because he goes, we're trading Bowens? And I'm like, yes, if you let me. He's like, why are we trading Bowens? And I said, if you let me, I will tell you the whole reason why we're trading Bowens. So he finally let me. I called it in. He's like beaming, this guy. And finally I said, yeah, we have two tight ends hurt. We need a tight end. Bowens, can bring us this tight end. So that was one story. I think it's a unique place where I don't think there's, Europe better than I do, but I don't think there's any place in this country like Green Bay that wraps itself around a pro, not college, pro team. As I said, I wasn't the general manager. I wasn't the president. Everyone knew me. And you have that life. Now, at the beginning of my career there, I thought it was cool, being recognized and checking out of this grocery store and being asked about the Donald Driver contract. But after a while, it became a little much. But it's what people sign up for. It's a truly unique place. and there's more good than bad, definitely.
Yeah, I understand that it can be a bit much, but also it's the beauty of sports, how it unites. It can unite a whole city like that. But yes, you gave a very good 13-minute answer, as you said, from a bit your history and a bit what you're doing right now. I heard an interview with you 3 years ago with Gary Vaynerchuk that said that you have joined Vayner Sports.
Oh, yeah.
So I recently had an episode with Darren Glover from Vayner Sports from the gaming part. So what is your involvement with Vayner Sports?
Well, and truthfully, it's no longer. I did a
okay.
2 years. I did a 2 year stint. Gary V was someone I met actually through his brother. His brother runs the sports side of Vayner, and they were just starting up in 2019, 2020. And they were looking for an experienced sports executive to really get them going. So I did a 2 year commitment with them, and what I did more than anything was really mentor young agents. Not Gary, of course, but Gary had 4 or 5 young sports agents working for him and trying to develop that practice. And there's a personal note there because Eugene Parker was one of my favorite agents, and he was kind of a mentor to me, a bunch of years older. He died, and in his funeral, I told his wife whatever I can do to help his sons. And one of his sons is now at Vayner Sports, Brandon Parker. And I was mentoring Brandon. That was the pull there. But it was a great experience. Obviously, Gary's a superstar. And we did that podcast where I talked a lot about drafting Aaron Rodgers, which everyone loves that story. But Gary, embellished it very well. It was fun to do that. But they're doing well because now the name, image, likeness space has been perfect for them because they're more a marketing company than anything, and they can take these young athletes and that's really a niche that they've jumped into.
Yeah, for sure. And that can work as a good segue into the third segment here with the recent events and some Q&A. So just very shortly, what impact has NIL has on college sports in US?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I think the whole reason for this is lawyers. We knew NIL was coming, name, image, likeness, opportunities for athletes to basically make them like other students on campus. They can go start a business. They can go do a deal with a McDonald's or a Coke or a furniture store, autograph session. And that part of name, image, likeness is very, very innocent and admirable. Then it's become sinister. It's become sinister because what boosters and donors have realized is we can use NIL as recruiting money. And what happens is they pull these collectives are out there now everywhere. Collectives are pools of donor money put together to pay players. It was never supposed to be like this. As I said, NIL was supposed to be shout outs on Instagram, get some free food, bring your teammates to a steakhouse. And you hear my voice, I'm a little disappointed. Now, I'm a pro player guy. I believe players should have more rights. I teach this stuff in sports law. Players used to be, just feudal slaves. They do whatever the team or the college said. And that's changed, and that's good. But I don't know where this is going, Marcus. It's just all the money's coming in for college football and basketball, basically to recruit. And now you're recruiting with NIL packages. Now, what do you have to do to make this money? I don't know, show up at a birthday party. It's not the way it was supposed to be. And yesterday, December 5th, was the opening of the college football transfer portal. And I just read there were 1,000 names in there. And they're all looking for better opportunities. Some are looking for money. And it's just, this can't be good. This can't be good. The answer is, I don't know. I don't know where it ends. Maybe these boosters decide it's a market correction in a year where you're not going to give this kind of money anymore. Just see what happens. But if you don't, someone else will. And then you don't have a good team. And everybody gets mad. It's also fueled, as you know, by the TV. And you look at the Big Ten now with UCLA and USC joining them next year. doing a $1 billion a year television media rights deal with Fox. I mean, this is where we're going. And that's sort of that's the part of this where it's hard to believe college football and college basketball are amateur. They're really not amateur. Are they like the NFL and NBA? No, but there's something in between. They're not amateur.
No. As you used to say, there will be lawyers.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing with NIL. The NCAA was going to enforce this, but not to get too legal, but there was a Supreme Court case, June of 2021, that ruled against the NCAA, and then they just got scared. They got scared of more lawyers, and they threw their hands up and said, we're not doing this. So NIL is unregulated. It's completely unregulated. And listen, I'm at Villanova. We're trying to regulate it internally. And I hope we're doing a good job. But at these big time football schools, it's just chaos.
Yeah. It's also very early though in the process. Do you think that maybe later on it will find a better way forward?
I think that's a good point. This has to shake out over a couple of years. Like crypto. It's just got to shake out and see who lands, who's left behind. Yeah,
that's true. Another interesting case was for what we Europeans call football, or the Football World Cup, soccer, with a Budweiser beer, who is one of the main sponsor, that Qatar decided to ban that from the stadiums. That, I guess, have very interesting legal aspects as well.
Yeah, and I didn't know all this. I mean, I had some guests on my podcast talking about it, but it seems as if for 12 years, from 2010, when it was awarded to Qatar, to 2022, on the eve of the World Cup 3 weeks ago, beer was going to be sold. Budweiser was going to be allowed to sell in the stadiums. And then they changed their tune. And there will be lawyers. I just wonder what the contract said. Did the contract say Budweiser beer would be sold, or did it just say Budweiser? Because as you know, Budweiser is selling Bud Zero in these stadiums, which is non-alcoholic. But I also learned that alcohol is everywhere over there now. It's in the club seats, the premium seats. It's in the fan areas, bars, everywhere. But in the stadiums, I think what happened is FIFA, they've got a $75 million sponsor in Budweiser, but they've got Qatar that just paid $200 billion. Like, they're going to defer to Qatar. If I'm probably not even saying the country name right, but that's what happened there.
Yeah, money talks.
Yes.
Moving on to interesting kind of recent event, but sports betting in United States has been for talk a lot, and for California in specific maybe. Yeah. But where is that going?
Another big sports law issue. 2018 Supreme Court case allowed for states to implement sports betting. It never happened before besides Nevada. And we're at the count today, as we speak right now, is 33 states out of 50. 33 states have legalized. Now, in different ways. Some you have to go to a casino. Most of them you can do on your phone, which has changed the game because young people live on their phone and you can make bets. I'm going to sound like an old guy again, as I did with NIL. I don't know if it's good. I mean, I just think a lot of people are betting money they don't have, and they've turned sports into a gambling experience. It's all over. And I say this as DraftKings is my podcast sponsor, but it's just everywhere. And I think it's exactly like you said. We got to see how this shakes out. We have seen some of these betting companies fall by the wayside. Of course, FanDuel, DraftKings, PointsBet are still in there, hanging in, big, strong companies. But we got to see how it shakes out. But from a consumer point of view, it obviously helps ratings for football, basketball, baseball, hockey, everything. People are more engaged if they are betting. And we found this out with fantasy sports before legalization. In the early 2010s, the boom of fantasy, it engages fans. And ultimately, that's the profit incentive. You're going to see more and more sports betting again, like what we just talked about, I don't know where this shakes out. But it's increased the value of franchises. It's increased the value of media rights extremely. So that's big.
That's true. And of course, there's so many aspects to it. You have how it impacts match fixing. You have also money laundering. You have also what you said, if you do it too much, young people, you might get addicted. So there are so many aspects to this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the states in their legalization have budgets set aside for compulsive gambling, Gamblers Anonymous, all that. But is it working? I don't know.
Yeah. Last question from this type of Q&A. So I talked to an agent from soccer in Europe, and he was very interesting to know how it works with representation contracts in the NFL. Are they time restricted, exclusive, non-exclusive? And in Europe, sometimes they try to have capped commissions for the agents. So just a quick one on how is that for NFL?
Yeah, you're regulated by the Players Association. So NBA Players Association, Major League Baseball Players Association, NFL Players Associations, and they put a cap on maximum fees. My most experience with the NFL, there's now a cap of 3%. So agent can take 3% of players, whatever money is bonus, salary, incentive bonuses as a maximum. And the important thing to note there is you don't get paid until your client gets paid. You can have a player making a salary of $10 million, but you can't take your 3% until the end of the season, which in football is January. And yeah, the agent business is a tough one because so many agents for so few players. I don't know if that's true in soccer. It just seems like there's so many agents out there trying to get in because it's an exciting life and everyone has glamorized that life. It's a hard life. It's a hard life. But there are regulations, and when you sign a player, it's usually, or it is always based on the length of his contract. So if a player only signs a 2-year contract, you obviously only have a 2-year agreement with him, and then you hope to continue to have the player. And a lot of players switch agents. It just it happens.
Yeah, of course. In the beginning, you promised me some great advice for people in the sports industry. So what's your best advice for people who want to pursue a career in sports?
Yeah, it's a tough question because it's, as I said, you wish it was an easier answer. But I think this is true in life, not just sports. You have to find a way to distinguish yourself. You have to find a way to be different than all the other people trying to get into a job or sports. So how do you do that? I always tell people, find your little area and dig in deep. So I have people all the time saying, I want to work for a team. And what do you want to do? I want to work in marketing. And what do you want to do? What in marketing? What about marketing? What drives you? What's your passion? Or people want to work in personnel, be a scout. Why? Why do you want to be a scout? You want to work in my area, salary cap. Why? What about the cap intrigues you? What do you know about the cap? So I always say, if you're going to talk to someone like me, I'm going to say, what's your angle? What do you do better than anyone else? And understanding you don't have experience, and how. And I would tell people to come in with a writing sample or a chart or some graph or Microsoft Excel that they've done that shows they spent time on it. I had a guy the other day say to me, he's a very humble young man. He's like, oh yeah, and I have a podcast, but only 30, 40 people listen. I'm like, you're ahead of everyone. You've got a podcast.
Yeah.
Like, keep that going. It's like, really? I'm like, yes. That right there, that puts you ahead of all these other young people trying to get a job because you've invested, you've done something about it. You don't just talk. So that's what I tell people. Just, if you're going to make yourself different, you got to work at it. You can't just say I got great grades or I work at this law firm. Or no, what have you done to help your future employer coming in not having a learning curve so much? So it's worked. People have come back to me and say, yeah, I did that. I came in with a writing sample. I came in passionate about what I want to talk about, and it worked for me. So I think it's good advice, and I hope people take it to heart.
Yeah, definitely. And not to say I love sports.
It never works.
Never.
I mean, quick story there, because when I was in Green Bay, I needed someone to analyze the salary cap information coming from the NFL every night to the teams. And who did I hire? I hired a woman from a trucking company who didn't know a football from a basketball. And she was wonderful because she was a data analyst. I didn't need a sports fan, right? I don't care. I don't want a sports fan. She'll learn about the Packers, but a data analyst was perfect. So it came in every night in, I don't know, Microsoft Access or whatever it was. And she organized it. She collated it every morning. I would look at what was coming in per team, especially our team, but all the other teams. And we'd have a whole printout every morning. That was it. I didn't need a sports fan. That's, find out what people really need. Focus on those skills rather than telling you, what the batting average is of some baseball player.
Yeah, for sure. Last question before I let you go, which I ask everyone. If you can choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think I should talk to?
Sports management podcast?
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I think a fascinating guy is Joe Pompliano, Pompliano. He and I have done each other's podcasts. He has done these Twitter threads on sports business angles, much different than I do, but extremely interesting. And he puts together videos, and he does this now full time. So he'd be fascinating on how he develops ideas and how he creates them, both visually and on Twitter threads.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of his work, both his podcast, his YouTube series, his newsletter. So big fan. Yes. That's a great guest. Andrew Brandt, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Mark, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to hearing from your listeners and hope they enjoy this.
Yes, how can they reach out to you? You have a great Twitter, I know that, but quickly, how can they get a hand of you?
Yeah, Twitter is my name, Andrew Brandt. I've actually started Instagram with these reels that my student cuts up for me every day. So people should go to Andrew Brandt 2, number 2, to get my Instagram. If you want to get the newsletter, andrew-brandt.com, just sign up there. And then I'll also take you to where you can get your daily videos from me for my Sports Business League. So yeah, and of course, the Business of Sports podcast every week, angles that hopefully you never get in other podcasts. Hope to make it a truly unique listen for everybody. And Sports Illustrated, every other week, I write a Business of Football column.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus.
Take care.